So let's go on to the next event. I'm going to deal with it's time to test an organ for disease. One of the most interesting events we have here. For those of you who have gone through the workshop, you probably know how much you had fun with this one or how much you struggled with it, one of the two. So I'm going to draw the circle. I'm going to leave it unlabeled until we're done. The first question, of course, is how do we know that it's time to test an organ for disease? Well, we know it's time to test an organ for disease because we have an organ that hasn't yet been tested. So I'm going to put the organ here. And of course, that single name there represents all the different organs. There can be many, many instances or occurrences of this thing we call an organ. All the different organs are represented by that, but we only deal with one at a time so as we can fit it in here. We can't deal with a whole bunch at a time. So what we want to do is to find the next available organ that hasn't yet been tested, that needs to be tested. So I'm going to label this as untested. And of course the next available one is going to be based on the date and time that we received it. And you remember earlier we talked about date and time received. So how do I know that the organ's untested? What's the data attribute that tells me it's untested? I don't have one yet. Because to know it's been untested, I have to know if it's been tested. And I don't know anything about that yet because that's the process we're working on. So I'm just going to call it untested for now, be happy with that, knowing that that's abstract, and I'm going to come back to it when I know more. So now that I have an organ that's untested, I need to, of course, test the organ. What information do I need to be able to test the organ? Well, I have to know what tests I'm going to run against the organ. And I'm just going to call that test. So here we have a test that we have to bring into the process, a test that's specific to a heart, for example, or specific to a liver, or the type of test, a test for hepatitis C, that kind of thing. So that thing that we call test has to have identification in terms of the test type, of course. We have to be able to identify the test procedure for each specific test. So we might have a hepatitis C test. We'll have a procedure for that that's specific to the hep C test. We might have the test equipment that's required. We might have the test environment. That's required as well. And there could be a whole lot of different things that we won't go any further than that at this point. So now that we have found an organ that's untested, we'll find out how we know that in a minute, we can find tests that are specific, such as a hepatitis C test. And now we have to do the test. We do the test according to the test procedure. That's part of this thing here. So we do the test. And what happens after we do the test? Well, we get some test results, of course, right? So I'm going to put test results. Now, somebody might say, well, rule number 1, in terms of data attribution rules, says attribute the data item to the object that best describes and to no other object. So the test result, someone might say, actually describes the test. Well, let's see if that works. Okay, so let's take the test result and put it out here, just for a moment. Okay, so I'm going to mark it test result. And if I put the test result here, we can see that this single specific test, this test is for example, hepatitis C. But we may have that test applied to many different organs. So the test result that we get, well, there could be a whole bunch of them. There could be several of those. So we have to put MV there. We might also want to know the time of the test. So I'm going to put date and time of test. Date and time of test. But of course, each test has a date and time, therefore MV. Okay? And we know it's difficult because we have to be able to associate the test result with a specific organ. And that gets difficult in this construct. But luckily we have data attribution for business rules, data attribution rule number 6, which says that when we find a repeating group of data inside an object, and that group has to be 2 or more, we bring that out of the object, the original object, and create a new object with it. So I'm going to take these 2 here out of there, and I'm going to create a new object called test result. And I'm going to put result here, and I'm going to take test result from here, and I'm going to put it over here, the actual test result. So that would be yay or nay, let's say, and the date and time of the test. And there may be other data items as well, but now these go away from there and they end up in here. And you'll notice that the MV goes away when I move it over here. So now I can have a single specific test result, which has the actual result and the date and time of the test, and I can attribute that single specific result to specific organs, which I couldn't do that over here. It becomes, well, let's say it becomes very difficult. So this goes away, and instead we have it here. So now we have start test an organ for disease. So find those organs that are untested. And remember I said, I don't know, how do I know they're untested? Well, the way I know that something is untested is because it doesn't have any previous test results. Well, where are the test results? Here they are here. So what I'm going to do is find the test results for an organ. And if there are, and I'm going to just put previous results, previous results, question mark, right? And I'm going to do a query and a response. So here's the response. And here's the query. So in other words, I go and find an organ, and I check to see if it has any previous test results. And if I find that it has previous test results, and it's been tested, then it's not untested. If I find that it doesn't have any previous test results, then of course that organ is untested, and it has to be tested. It doesn't have any previous results. That's how I know that this organ that I'm working with is not yet tested. So, I find the organ that has no previous test results. I conduct the tests in terms of the test procedure. I do that, and I record or remember the results. Pretty straightforward, isn't it? Straightforward with a little bit of practice, I think, more than anything else. So I have to name this. Good, strong name, test organ. And there we go. So now we have the picture, we have some data attributes, we found a new object as we went through it, and the only thing left now, the business rules. We'll get to that in just 1 minute.